Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. By now you've heard about the verdict in the state trial of the murderers of Tyre Nichols, a heinous crime captured on video, irrefutable evidence of an unforgivable crime, and the purest proof that we have an enemy within in the black community, one that is as vicious and as deserving of being crushed as any gun-toting thug from the dominant society. Alright, let's just cut to the chase here. This is a typical example of an all-white jury who ignored the law and deliberately engaged in an act of blatant jury nullification by giving an across-the-board acquittal to murderers who they knew to be guilty. Now, we can be disgusted at the outcome, but you can't be surprised. This was engineered. There's a demographic in this society who is totally and completely opposed to justice, the rule of law, or even common decency and morality. And these prosecutors and judges and police, they know that they can depend on that demographic to back up any act of anti-black violence, no matter who carries it out. As long as it serves the interests of white primacy, they'll do it. There's a demo in this country who has always benefited from institutional injustice because it was the only way they could actually get anything. They are shameless and willing to stoop to any low to maintain the system of racial goodies, giveaways, and guarantees that they require because without it, they would have nothing. Two of the murderers of Tyre Nichols already pleaded guilty in federal court, and white media reports are that they intend to plead guilty to the state charges, though that's not guaranteed. But regardless, all of these animals were guilty because they were all involved. It's irrelevant which specific criminal was the one who struck the blow that killed Tyre Nichols. They were all involved, and all of them are equally guilty. That's how the law works, but of course we don't live under a system of law. We live under a system of white supremacy. Despite this show of white racism in state court, all three of these animals have already been convicted in federal court last year, and like their other two co-conspirators, they could also face time in federal prison. Of course, we have to say could repeatedly because the judge in the federal case has refused to actually sentence any of them until after their state trial. That's what he decided to do. He said, I'm going to hold off on sentencing until at least June because I know it's going to take a month to put these guys on trial. So I'm going to wait to see what the state outcome is. Then I'll decide what the sentence should be. Now, the judge didn't have to do that. These guys were convicted back during the summer of last year. The judge chose to wait this long. And I think that's because he intends to give them a slap on the wrist, and he wants to use whatever state verdict came down as cover to do so. Here we are 8 months after they pleaded guilty in federal court, and the judge is waiting to see what happens in state court. He didn't have to do that. He wants to do that. And we all know the reason why. Now, back to this all-white jury. Why would a white jury in Tennessee pass up the chance to put 3 black defendants who they know are guilty as hell in prison? It's because they think that this is going to help to push the envelope and benefit white racists who kill black citizens. This was about a gang of bigots on a jury acting as accessories to murder after the fact. These cowardly pieces of trash on that jury would never have had the nerve to try something like that themselves. They never do. So they get on code to protect anyone who does. But make no mistake, the mental calculus that those white jurors were using was that this is meant to reestablish and reassert that the police, white cops in particular, are not to be punished for killing a black person, no matter how blatant the murder may be. And they already know that this will benefit white police. It's merely an unintended consequence that in this case, the cops were black. It's Tyre Nichols' race that decided this verdict and nothing else. Now, this crime took place in Memphis. By crime, I'm talking about what this jury did. Tennessee is the birthplace of the Ku Klux Klan, and Memphis, you'll recall, is where Dr. King was assassinated. This just goes to remind all black people these unreconstructed Confederates have not changed in 150 years. They will never change, because evil doesn't change. The people there are as racist and dirty as hell as they've ever been, and every black person in that state is deathly aware of the mind-numbing bigotry that so many of these white supremacists there exhibit. These are the dead-enders of the Confederacy that we're talking about here. But we have to understand that white supremacy, like any system of oppression, is reliant on having people from the group being oppressed to act as collaborators. And this incident was no different. Now, the first thing that needs to be noted is this trial was supposed to take place in Memphis, but the judge, in an unprecedented move, decided to move the trial away from Memphis, which is majority black, and to instead have the trial held hundreds of miles away in Hamilton County, which just so happens to be 76% white, and among the most rural group of inbreds you ever saw. Now, have you ever seen an incident where a white cop was on trial for killing a black person and they looked and said, "Ooh, we got to get you out of this mostly white area that the trial was going to take place in. We're going to move you over to the blackest area we can find." That never happens. But that's what they did in this case. As racist as Tennessee is, as many complaints as there have been about all white juries in that state, why would any judge, particularly a black one, deliberately move the trial of 3 black defendants out of a majority black city and move it to an overwhelmingly white county? Why would he do that? I've told you time and time and time again, it matters what the racial composition of a jury is. Every prosecutor, defense attorney, and judge knows that one. There's a reason that prosecutors fight tooth and nail to make sure that black people in general, and black men in specific, are not allowed to sit on juries. The first people to be excused during voir dire are going to be black. That's guaranteed. Prosecutors understand that the composition of a jury is key to what kind of verdict is going to come out of that process. That jury of white supremacists saw this as an opportunity to send a racial message. They could care less about these pieces of garbage because they hadn't killed a white man. It's the same reason that a white jury acquitted Kyle Rittenhouse for killing 2 white men, because those white men had decided to protest in defense of black people's right to live. So that white jury understood that this wasn't about a violent punk. This was about sending a racial message. Same reason Greg Abbott did something that no other Texas governor in history had done, to pardon a killer who he knew to be guilty, because this was about weaponizing his office to override the law in furtherance of white supremacy. And the prosecution in this case knew what was happening with that jury, as did the judge. Whether it's Tammy the Mammy or this scumbag, we need to understand that we're up against an organized offense, and that virtually all the people who you see on the bench were selected by white power specifically because they will do white power's bidding. This judge, James Jones Jr., was elected in 2022 as an alleged nonpartisan. At least that's how he identifies himself, but we know that's a lie. Politicians who claim to be nonpartisan, that's because they have politics that are exactly the opposite of the voters who they're trying to get the votes from. If you got somebody who's right of center or hard right of center, and they're trying to run in one of the big cities, which tend to be further to the left, they'll sit there and say, "Oh, well, I'm nonpartisan." That way they don't have to identify as a Republican. And then when these people wind up getting found out by their voters, that's when they decide, "Oh, you know what, maybe I can go ahead and commit to a party after all." But it'll be the opposite of the one of the voters in their district. That's what this nonpartisan stuff means. Now, this Judge Jones character has a Facebook page, and he actually had the nerve to pepper it with references to a god that he clearly doesn't believe in and definitely doesn't serve. Then again, one of the devil's favorite tricks is to invoke the name of God. And here's a picture of the crooked judge with his crooked family. Now hands up who here didn't see this one coming. And you better believe there was a lot of white money behind his campaign. A black face to defend white power. He's their insurance policy. And the claim that they couldn't get a fair trial was a lie. They all knew it. They're black defendants who are going to be tried in a majority black city, one of the few in the state. Their hometown, no less. It would be impossible for them not to get a fair trial, because they would literally be tried by a jury of their peers, their friends, neighbors, and acquaintances. How could any sane person make the argument that black men couldn't get a fair trial in Memphis, a majority black city, one of the few in the state? Activists, lawyers, and political figures have argued for centuries that black people cannot get a fair trial when the system and those who run it systematically exclude black jurors. That's a fact so blatant that it's a given. And yet you had a black judge who ignored that fact and decided, we don't want any black jurors on this particular trial. And he moved that trial with 3 black defendants out of a majority black city, hundreds of miles away, to the whitest county he could find. Since when are white jurors from a rural slum the peers of black defendants from the big city? Answer, they're not. This is because the judge already knew what the prejudices and racial biases of that jury would be. This was about engineering a verdict. We have to understand that we didn't put any of these Negroes on the bench. And you don't see the Democrats saying a word to remove them either, do you? Not one of them is trying to do that. Then again, when Judge Aaron Persky ignored the law and allowed a rapist, Brock Turner, to be set free without so much as a slap on the wrist, in California no less, where was the protest from the Democrats on that one? California is Democrat Central, or so we're told, and yet the so-called liberal political party, as well as the so-called liberal white media, both were in the tank for the judge, standing against the will of the people, sounding no different than the average GOP bigot from Mississippi. We'll continue with the moment of truth in just a moment, but first, a word from the official sponsor of Black Empowerment. Power tools. There's no telling when something's going to come up, so make sure you carry your power tools at all times. You never know when you're going to need to bring the hammer down, or when you'll have some trash that needs to be blown away, or some obstacle that requires cutting down. Don't get caught empty-handed. Keep your hammer close by. Keep that leaf blower at the ready, and always carry your steel. Power tools. Because no matter what your day job or side hustle may be, there's no excuse for not being ready to put in some work. The Democratic Party is controlled opposition. They're not trying to change anything, certainly not where police violence is concerned. What they're trying to do is to get you to sit on your hands while nothing is done. And then when you step up and force changes, the Democrats immediately get on code with the Republicans. They work in lockstep to attack you. White supremacy is injustice. It is a lie, the biggest lie ever told. And as Alexander Solzhenitsyn said, the only way to perpetuate a lie is through the use of violence. That's where the police come in. In 2020, for the very first time, you had police finally being consistently punished for their crimes. Not as harshly as they should be, but it was moving in that direction, and the public fully supported it. Now, did Democrats celebrate this and say that they wanted to pass laws to reinforce this new status quo and to harden it and to make sure that it becomes the norm? Or did they begin lying and claiming that all of these people who were forcing changes on the system, they were the problem and that they had to be stopped?
That phrase, defund the police, cost Jamie Harrison tremendously. Stop sloganeering. Sloganeering kills people. Sloganeering destroys movements. Stop sloganeering.
Did you get that? The police don't kill people. Sloganeering. That's what kills people. Tyre Nichols was killed by sloganeering. It wasn't the 5 thugs in blue who murdered him. They weren't the ones who killed him. Sloganeering killed him. So says nigga Jim Clyburn. Ever since Barack Obama attacked the word woke because it was being used by people saying defund the police, that was what kicked open the floodgates. He did that. And ever since, Democrats have been lying through their teeth to protect the thugs in blue.
We are still carrying the weight.
Yeah.
And let's set aside the substance of police violence and abuse. I made my points very clearly on that. We are still carrying the weight of defund the police around.
Come on.
Now, by the way, almost no member of Congress said that.
It was a Republican talking point that you guys let them run with at you.
And so we're just the passive victims of that fact? Or can we stand up and say defunding the police is a bad idea that is opposed most intensely by African Americans? So
it's actually not a bad idea when you explain it to people as about reallocating resources. But my point being is, I do think that people on your wing of the party have hidden behind that rather than look at other issues that cost you seats, cost you votes. Like defund the police was not the reason you lost the election last year. No one was even running on it. Joe Biden increased funding to the police.
I was giving you an example.
Now you see what happened there? Unlike that puff piece that took place on Axios years back where you had that little fruitcake, she's sitting here just letting Jim Clyburn spout whatever and giving no pushback, not even attempting to check him on it. Mehdi Hasan actually did his job. He confronted Jim Himes, pointed out Jim Himes was lying, and Jim Himes didn't even attempt to try to defend it. He didn't even try to defend it. He immediately retreated and said, well, I was just giving as an example. Yeah, a false example. And that's how you know that this came straight from DNC headquarters. You got Jim Himes, who's been out there repeating this lie over and over again, which amounts to years of Democrats repeating the same lie over and over again. And when they finally get confronted on it, they can't defend it at all. They have to immediately retreat. So this proves that they're lying. They know that they're lying. And that being the case, when it comes time to talk about punishing the police, what does that mean when the Democrats tell you, oh, we're very much concerned about police reform? Really? Like this? First thing they say is defund the police, which, by the way, is a very mild thing. That's like the mildest thing that you can do. It's not even punishing the police. It's simply not rewarding them. As far as the Democrats are concerned, well, that's too close to actually holding police accountable, so we're not going to do that. And that being the case, these idiots who tell you, we got to vote for the Democrats, this is what you're going to be voting for. It's no different than the Republicans. It is fully understood that these criminals cannot operate without being protected at all levels, from the county prosecutor all the way up to the federal government. They wouldn't be able to operate otherwise. The purpose of the police in American society is to be the organized violence that forces you to live under oppression, and that violence must be carried out with impunity. When a group of people commits violence, but it's consistently punished, you can call it immoral, you can call it wrong, But you can't call it oppression because the absolute requisite for oppression is that the violence is not punished. And when these white supremacists are punished consistently enough, long enough, their violence inevitably stops because they're either all in prison or enough of them have gotten the message that their behavior will be punished. The police are the guarantors of white supremacy because they're the violence that the system calls on in order to compel people to comply with it. They're also the reason that the 1% are able to freely rape the land, rob the national treasury, and just take whatever they want, because whenever you try to take advantage of whatever opportunities exist, they bring up all of their rules and alleged laws that are in place to prohibit you, but that don't apply to these other people. This is why the thugs in blue must be protected at all costs, because these are the people that they're protecting. So the reason we have the crooked judges like Tammy the Mammy and this degenerate Jones and the Daniel Camerons is because the Democrats want them there. And when you look at trash like Jim Clyburn, you see that both political parties work together to protect the thugs in blue, and that they've been working together all along. And the moment that you challenge the status quo, it's not the Republicans who come running first to bash you, it's the Democrats. When you had those two Democrat shills in the Tennessee legislature who decided that they were going to make a stink about gun control, you had Kamala Harris and other Democrats who couldn't wait to get to Tennessee to support them. Now you got black folks, a real, genuine, actual grassroots movement against police violence, and the Democrats are nowhere to be seen. Have you heard or seen any Democrat anywhere introducing any sort of legislation to punish this kind of police brutality, or seen anyone saying anything about a Tyre Nichols policing act? They haven't said a single word, and neither have any of your so-called white liberal pundits. They haven't said anything either. You think that's a coincidence? The enemy had their backs broken in 2020. They've been made to eat feces ever since, and we forced them to swallow it whole. Now they're trying to get their little courage up. For them, this is about pushing the envelope. We have to be honest here. There's a lot of Negroes who have sold their souls to white supremacy. Black cops pretend not to know why the black community doesn't trust them. It's because we know why they wanted to be in the police to begin with. You never see black cops criticizing these police unions for defending the killings of black citizens. You never see them doing anything about it. They're the fools who the cops send in and say, oh, why don't you go ahead and talk to your people and get them to calm down. Tell them, I'm black and I'm on your side. I see these things and I want you to know you got to let the system play out. That's what these black cops do. They know that these white supremacists in these police departments that they work side by side with, they will never stick up for them. The police unions definitely don't protect black cops, especially if they're accused of killing a white person. And yet these black cops are the first ones to play the fool for these police departments and to be their willing stooges. They'll be the very first ones ready to cover for white cops who kill black citizens or even engage in the same kind of behavior themselves. They joined the police department because they knew that they could get themselves a quickie pension after a few years, but also because they wanted to be able to exercise the exact same abuse of power that their white supremacist counterparts do. That's the ugly truth, but it is a truth. They know that they would be punished if they harmed a white person, so they decided, hey, if the only people that we can mistreat with impunity are black people, then that's what we're going to do. See, these police and sheriff's departments, they know exactly what kind of person they're getting when they hire these kind of sorry Negroes. The blue wall has these fools on the outside, and yet they willingly lie, stay silent in the face of egregious crimes, and kill black people because they're on the side of the enemy. Now, as for what can be done about these animals, for the time being, until they're sentenced at the federal level, there's really not much that can be done. But as far as this corrupt Judge Jones goes, this scumbag needs to be removed from the bench. That's something that can be done, but don't expect the Democrats to be leading the charge on that one. In fact, don't expect any help from them at all. They have already made up their minds that they're on the side of white supremacy, and more importantly than that, black people have been allowed to get too loose. Black people seem to think that their demands are supposed to actually be listened to and obeyed. So they got to show black people that no, we're getting things back to the old normal. And that means they're going to be blatantly, egregiously on the side of the Republicans in this case. They're going to be sticking up for the thugs in blue, and they're going to be telling black people that we're the problem. So family, let's understand the situation that we're in. Let's be on our guard for ourselves and those we care about. Let's be ready to protect ourselves from police violence and protect citizens who are in distress. Let's also be ready to make sure that anybody, whether they be in the white media, whether they be these corrupt politicians, or some unthinking clod on the internet or what have you, if they stick up for the thugs in blue, if they try to give us some feeble excuse about why we need to sit on our hands when the police are attacking or trying to kill us, then let's make sure that the thugs in blue are not the only ones who are held accountable for trying to support injustice. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Earth Angel, Angel Maynor, Frederica Moore, R. Laz, and John Harvin. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.